So I was perusing a classic gaming and PC hardware website, WCCF Tech, and I came across an article that I actually found quite interesting, and it made me do a double take. So let's take a look at this and why. So if we look at this article, it's talking about how Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to have multiple big cities, which has been rumored for a while, and I am quite excited for, by the way, but that it's only possible on next-gen consoles, talking about memory restrictions and basically stopping there, basically saying that for the most part, we're just going to watch next gen's development and launch when the game's ready and when we're ready with them on the next gen consoles. But the weird thing is, if you scroll down in the comments section here, and the link's in the description, you'll see a lot of people arguing that that's bullshit, that there's no way. And well, first of all, it can't be bullshit. They shoehorned GTA 5 onto last gen just because they wanted that extra money on the 360 and PS3. And then they've made it on PS4 and Xbox One, and then they re-released it again on PC. Rockstar will milk if they want to, and they definitely want to and can, because everyone will buy. I believe everyone owns 2 copies of GTA 5 now on average. Now I make that joke because I think they've actually sold over 60, 80 million copies, which if you do the math works out to basically everyone who plays games owns GTA 5. You know, if they could, they would, but there are real restrictions on this gen that will limit how far it can go. And when we talk, and there's been a lot of rumors coming out right now about next gen, and I think a lot of people are missing some of the things, like how Mark Cerny's talking about how the way the SSD will be organized and how fast it will be, along with PCI 4.0, there are things you literally can't do or render fast enough on current gen consoles. Next gen is not going to be a small leap. So I want to talk about what will make this gen go obsolete, and then what will we get out of next gen, because I'm quite excited to talk about how big I think it's going to be. Before we talk about next gen specs, we need to make sure everyone who listens to this understands last gen specs, because if you can't understand what the difference was between performance of the previous consoles, there's no point to me talking about rumors for a PS5 or Xbox Two. There's just no point. Okay, so let's look here. First of all, and I'm just going to get this out of the way, is please leave if you're a fanboy. I don't care. Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, leave. Because I'm going to talk about how some of these consoles are objectively more powerful than each other, and it has nothing to do with fanboyism. The Xbox One really suffered from, I think, aiming for the wrong goals at first. They wanted 8 gigabytes of RAM from the get-go. From its inception, it was planned to have 8 gigabytes. From PlayStation's inception, they always said 4 to 8. They could have gotten away with 4. Of course, video textures would have looked much worse. Background tasks would have been worse, but they could have gotten away with it. To be quite honest, you can optimize textures enough on console. They certainly got away with tiny amounts of RAM on the 360 and PS3, especially for a long time. But the fact is, at the last minute, and this is true, showrunner for the Borderlands games told Mark Cerny, the chief architect of PlayStation, that, look, we think your console is what it needs to be, and we think you have all of the right performance metrics. But if you don't get to 8 gigabytes of RAM, Xbox will have a massive advantage. And so at the last minute, and this can happen with the PS5 and the next Xbox when we talk about it, RAM amounts can double overnight. They just decided to eat the cost at first and go with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And that gave the PS4... I really do want to get this out of the way. The PS4 was twice as powerful as the Xbox One. And I know there are so many fanboys who are turning it off now, but just listen for a goddamn second, guys. We're talking about, it's not just the teraflops, right? It's the fact that it has, look at this, it has 50% more TMUs, double the ROPs, triple the bandwidth. Even with the ESRAM, the bandwidth wasn't even much more in that tiny buffer than this. And here's what people need to understand. And please, please stick with me, people. Fanboys leave. People who actually care about hardware stay. The ESRAM buffer, I believe the Xbox 360 had about 10 megabytes, which was enough for decent detail in 720p. But one and without anti-aliasing, which is why later 360 and PS3 games look so terrible when it comes to anti-aliasing most of the time. Not in every game, but most of the time. You could fit enough data for an okay 720p buffer. But when you go to 1080p, we're talking about a resolution that's over twice as big. So you're already past 20 megabytes. And then you're going to want to squeeze much more detail into that because now you can. And basically what it comes down to is you want about a 60 megabyte buffer at least, is my understanding, for 1080p. And 32 megabytes just isn't enough unless you turn down anti-aliasing, put it in a lower resolution. So yes, the ESRAM helped and made up for the DDR3 to a certain extent, but it added programming complexity, and it basically makes it so the Xbox One will always be doomed to be a 900p console if it wants to run at the same frame rates as the PS4. Additionally, if we go back to the chart, the PS4 had a backup ARM processor and 256 megabytes of DDR. It had an entire secondary processor, so you didn't need to waste part of one of the cores, right? So yeah, this faster clock speed, it's good it's clocked faster because it really needs to be to use part of one of the cores for background tasks. And that's also the reason when you get right down to it that the PS4 also can record for 30 minutes or an hour. The Xbox only does 5 minutes, or can do more background tasks depending, there's a reason it has those advantages. And if we move on to the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, it's also a pretty interesting comparison. One came out a year earlier and was definitely just built from the ground up to be incredibly, incredibly easy to port between PS4 and PS4 Pro. They really, literally wanted you to be able to program the game for PS4 Pro, and then they basically just flick a switch and just double the resolution for from PS4 to PS4 Pro. That was Sony's goal the whole time. So with that in mind, they doubled the ROPs. Yes, this is not a typo. It has as many ROPs as Vega, and it has double the TMUs as the PS4 base. It also added Vega customizations like FP16 and enhanced asynchronous compute. We have 8 asynchronous compute units, more even than the Xbox One X. However, if we're being quite honest, it probably couldn't really benefit much more than, say, adding about 40 ROPs. This was really just done for backwards compatibility, ease of use, same with the TMUs. But no matter how you dice it, this is an advantage. It can feed those stream processors, in a more effective way depending on the resolution and the asynchronous compute. Double the asynchronous compute cores. FP16 allows it to really render those stream processors at maximum capacity in a way that you just can't do at the Xbox One X. But it's undoubtable. You just can't doubt that the Xbox One X has substantially more bandwidth and more compute power overall, and its real advantage is, in my opinion, it really is literally just the bandwidth and the VRAM. Don't get me wrong, this helps, and it's definitely, I would argue, a bit better than the back end Sony decided to go with here, but it's not that much stronger. What you really have here is that since the PS4, and they did add, actually, if we go back, 1 gigabyte of DDR3, so you can do all of the background tasks now on the PS4 on that ARM processor and background RAM. It did free up some more GDR5 for the buffer, but you're basically always going to be limited on the PS4 Pro by how big the frame buffer can get and how much video RAM you can use. So the Xbox One X is basically, it's never going to render things the PS4 can't, but it will always render whatever the PS4 can at a higher resolution. And it's just that simple. And it also has a good processor that makes up for not having a backup processor. But anyways, if we look at these consoles, what we can say is their processors are definitely much, much weaker. And I would say so much so weaker that they're not going to last as long as you think, really. The next gen consoles are coming out in 2020, and they will have processors that I estimate as being 4 to 8 times stronger. Actually, the next Xbox might be over 10 times stronger than current gen processors. More on that later. It's pretty exciting sounding. And I'm sorry, let's go down which ones will go obsolete first. I'm just going to go one by one now and talk about it. But the long story short is it's the processors, and that is what we should look forward to for next gen. But to be specific, if we zoom in here, I'm just going to get this out of the way. The Xbox One base is not going to last past 21. It's just not. I'm sorry. You're not having cross-gen games that run on next-gen consoles that are rumored to be as strong as a 2080 on something with 16 goddamn ROPs. I mean, this is APU level bullshit here. Like and I mean, and I'm not just talking about like, you know, buffed up APUs that you're gonna see like next gen Navi. No, I'm talking about what's in $100 APUs right now. That is how weak the Xbox One is. That is why it struggles. And like if you look at Red Dead Redemption 2, it can practically not even render the game in 720p. And so for that reason alone, I'm sorry, people. After all, Microsoft certainly fixed their mistake with the Xbox One X in a major way. I would actually make the argument, and again, please, fanboys, just calm down. I'm making the argument that the PS4, the PS4 Pro, and the Xbox One X are basically all going to become obsolete at the same time. And that will probably be a year or two after Xbox One base. So basically and to be clear, there will be games at launch that just can't run on all of these consoles. All of them. They'll be at launch. But moving on, anything the Xbox One X can run, the PS4 will be able to run, except it might have a few frame hitches, and it will definitely be at a way lower resolution. But that's really all it comes down to. But now we need to start talking about the differences between generations and what they bring us. You know, if you look at the current gen here, it really just brought us doing everything well. And I really want to explain here if my screen can actually switch. Here we go. So if you think about last gen, like the PS360, that was a gen that really changed everything. And I mean everything. It was a generation where you could have experiences that you just couldn't have with the previous gens at all. We're talking about, you know, realistic facial expressions in LA Noire or Mass Effect, persistent saves that carry over. If you want to do 256 multiplayer, here's a persistent online game mag that has massive multiplayer battles. But it had to sacrifice graphics and physics. And now we're about to take that metric leap again, where we move into a world where we have lightning storage and, you know, the equivalent of modern high, you know, enthusiast grade processors that will load games faster than we've ever seen before, while ray tracing and doing complex AI that allows for new game experiences. And backwards compatibility will be there, so don't worry, you'll run your old PS4 games or Xbox games as well. They're going to be backwards compatible, but don't expect the current gen consoles to keep up for more than a couple years, especially with some of the AAA games that want to push boundaries right away. This gen will be limited in how long it can last with the metric leap we're about to see on next gen consoles. And that's a good thing, because we are about to get a new golden age of creative giant AAA and indie games that push the boundaries of what a game can even be. And that is good, even if you need to buy a new console or a new processor. All right, people. Thanks. I had fun making this video. Tell me what you think in the comments section below, because I think when we see what the games are capable of, people will stop complaining. And this always happens every gen, about having to buy a new console. People say they don't want a new console now, or they don't want to spend the money now. But that's now. This is over a year from now when these consoles come out, guys. Over a year from now, you'll be ready, especially, I'm guessing, when you see what they're capable of doing. And importantly for PC gamers, what they bring to the table for making PC gaming not held back by consoles anymore. Like, subscribe, share. Please support me on Patreon. That's really, the more supporters I get, the more videos I will do, and the more I'll increase my quality. And you get to talk with me on Discord. Give me suggestions if you're a premium Patreon on the types of videos I do next. Ask me in-depth questions. Ask me what I'm working on, what I've heard from some sources I talk to. Please support me there, and thank you.